Tonight, I want us to look at a great reset, a great reset. And hopefully that gives you an idea where we're going to look at as far as Saul. You know, there's a big difference, a massive difference between a person that is a passionately religious person and someone who is a faithful follower and disciple of Jesus Christ. It's massively different because it all depends on where that focus is. You know, history shows that the most dangerous place that a person can be is to be deeply religious, highly content with where they are and comfortable, and completely wrong. Think about that, because that's where we're going to see Saul as we are introduced to him in these first couple of verses. When we meet Saul, he is on the road to Damascus, right? He isn't backsliding rebel that's trying to run away. He's not a Jonah. Guess what he is? Man, he is on fire for God in his eyes. He believes everything. He is a theological expert. He has been trained by the best of the best. And he is not only highly educated, but he is convinced of his own righteousness and the rightness of what he is doing. And he is entirely comfortable that he is in the middle of God's hand, doing God's will and doing God's work. Man, he thought he had spiritual 20/20 sight. I say that pun intended because we know that his sight's about to be taken from him, right? Yet Jesus had to physically blind him in order to stop him and arrest him, hold him until he could finally learn how to truly spiritually see. So, how does that apply to us just in the introduction? Think about it. Most of us have been Christians, have been disciples of Jesus, have been followers of Jesus for a lifetime, for decades. You know the songs, you know the flow of the service, how it's going to work. You already probably know pretty much so what these scriptures are before I even read them to you. And the sad part is that, you know, we at some point or another, we think that we've got our faith and we've got our worship all tied up and placed in this nice, neat little box with the bow tied on it, and it just looks so pretty. And we pull it out on Sundays, and then we put it back over on the stand, and we go on about our business throughout the week, and we think we are perfectly fine. But I'm tell you, you know, that this, as we read through this chapter, we're going to have to ask ourselves some uncomfortable questions, because Paul's experience brings, at least for me, brings up some questions for me to look at how I'm treating the Lord, how I'm understanding where the Lord's direction is, how I'm following him. Am I following him in my own will, or am I following his will type thing? Here's one question. What if the very areas where we feel the most spiritually secure are actually blind spots? And they're preventing us from truly following after Jesus. Let that settle for a minute. What if the areas where we think we are the most secure, where comfortable as can be, are really blind spots that we need to investigate and step out of? So let's look at verses 1 through 6. I'm going to ask a couple of y'all to read some verses for me, so it's not just me up here making a lot of noise, all right, all evening. Robin, do you mind reading verses 1 through 6? I'm going to get you a microphone. No, I'm just teasing. Well, I got the look. Did y'all see the look I just got? There you go. Candy saw the look. That's exactly right. So we're in Acts chapter 9, starting in verse 1 through 6. you go. We see in these first opening verses as we're reintroduced to Saul, whom we met very briefly in chapter 7 as he was holding the coats of those that would stone Stephen, the first martyr, to death. We see the great interruption. All right, we started with the great reset. His life is about to be reset. So our first point here is the interruption. He is a sovereign disciple. He in his own mind, he believes that he is on right in the straight and narrow, perfectly in alignment with God's will, and yet we see this huge interruption. And we can see there this whole illusion of spiritual correctness. He thinks he's got it all figured out. A lot of us are, that have been Christians for a lot of our life. Man, it's easy for us to become comfortable in religion, comfortable in practice, comfortable in worship. We become deeply religious, but we actively miss Christ's heart in what we are supposed to be truly about. We get caught up in all the good deeds. I'm going to tell you, it's, we're supposed to feed the hungry. Oh, we've got the benevolence. Now, don't think that I'm poo-pooing the benevolence. I am not. I'm excited about that we are doing exactly what God said that we're doing. But if we're not careful, we let stuff like feeding the hungry once a month when we open the doors for the food pantry like we did this Friday, or, hanging coats out or distributing coats as winter starts to approach. All those good things where we're taking care of the poor and the needy, if we're not careful, we set our sights on those instead of on Him. And our motives become mixed, if not just completely adulterated. And the next thing you know, we're missing the boat completely. You think about trunk or treat. Is there anything wrong with trunk or treat on Halloween? I'm going to tell you my personal opinion. Now, I'm okay with it as long as we're not just going through paces, just through efforts or whatever. There's all these things. We're having an opportunity to have kids on campus and to be able to hopefully share a moment with them. I don't want to just be giving out boxes of food and meeting physical needs, and people that were in our parking lot, in our building, when they came in for distribution, never heard somebody pray over them, never heard anybody mention the gospel to them, and they leave just as lost as they walk off campus as they were when they came on campus. That scares me. That illusion that we are all spiritual and everything we're doing is great, we have to be careful of that. Paul was there. We have to make sure that we don't set our own agenda, that the Holy Spirit actually is leading us. We think, oh, God, I know exactly what you want me to do. Here I'm going. I'm off and running. That isn't how it works. That's not the way. Think about all the past examples of legalistic, whatever you want to call it, that you can think of in your own mind of that where everything was, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. You can't wear, girls can't wear shorts. They have to wear leotards. That was one I've used before with Robin and I when we were in the youth group. Nothing less than a leotard. And really it was supposed to be a dress down, at least to the knees, all that type of stuff. I wasn't allowed to wear jeans in church. I had to wear something nicer than it. Remember the corduroy Levi's or whatever, the corduroys? Yeah. That was acceptable. That was tacky is what that was. I'm just saying. But those become a burden to us, and we chase after those as if that's what it gets us into heaven. Don't let that be us. And did you notice there as Saul is on that road and Jesus confronts him, Jesus is the one that's in pain. Why are you persecuting me? Was Saul, Saul reaching into heaven somehow or another and actually, sticking Jesus with a pitchfork or whatever? No. Well, in some ways he was. Think about it. Because when we fight amongst ourselves, when we have division amongst ourselves, we are hurting the Lord. We are His body. Can I tell you that if I stub my big toe walking out this evening, my whole body hurts. I know that it's not just my toe that's in pain. Why can't we see that about Jesus? When we hurt one another, Jesus himself is being hurt. There's a shared pain of the body. We're injuring him. And, you know, not only are we causing him pain, but a lot of times in that division that crops up from time to time, we're actually diminishing him in the eyes of the world. I don't know which is worse, that we're causing him actual pain because of the inward fighting, or the fact that we've taken his glory and diminished it because the world can ridicule him, can ridicule the church, thereby ridiculing him. And then where did Paul end up at? Where did Saul end up? I guess I try to keep it where it's supposed to be at. Where did Saul end up at? And he ended up on the ground, on his knees, did he not? You see that whole posture of submission? That really should be ours. Do we ask this same question that he asked? I mean, we've been around, we've been walking this road together for a long time. We've been Christians and walking the straight and narrow for a long time, as mature Christians especially. Do we ever ask ourselves or ask the Lord, what shall I do, Lord? What do you want me to do? Do we just think that we have it all figured out? There's a point in Acts 22. It will be years before we get there, probably. But when we do get there, we will see Paul, by that time, Paul recapitulating, sharing this exact event with those that have arrested him in Jerusalem right before they bound him, and send him off to Rome. He starts that journey to Rome for his trial, ultimately to be beheaded, right? And he remembers every detail. He remembers this question, what shall I do, Lord? Is recorded in Acts chapter 22, verse 10. He never forgot this encounter. This encounter changed him forever. He is fully convinced, and he will remember his entire rest of his life what happened, and including willingness to take insult, to be arrested, to be beaten, to be stoned, left for dead. And then when that wasn't enough, they come back and they arrest him and they haul him halfway across the continent so that they can try him, so that they can put him to death. Man. But Paul always remembered this, and he refers back to this event. Do we remember our encounter with Jesus, that first encounter that we had? Does it have that much relevance still in our lives that it truly not only changed us then, but we are still different people today because it just changed our world. It changed our complete outlook. It changed our complete focus, our expectation of what life was all about. That is what happened to Saul. And a lot of times I think that, we have that moment where we come to Christ, and then all of a sudden, which church is it in Revelations where they've lost their first love? Remember that one? Yeah, Ephesus. I mean, it's like we tend to do that ourselves. We don't remember what it was like to be truly surrendered. It's like all of a sudden we want to pick everything back up and go, okay, now that I'm yours, God, I got this. You don't have to worry about me anymore. That's what we do. I'm sorry, but we do. We do that. We think that we can handle it and that we will be more successful than we were before. So a couple of cautions there right out of the gate as we look at the interruption. Look at this next part, verses 7 through 9. Dalton, do you mind reading 7 through 9 as we look at the blindness that comes?
When his eyes were opened, they led him by the hand, brought him into the man. And he was 3 days.
So we saw the interruption. Now we're seeing a blindness here that comes upon here. Here is a guy that thought he had everything figured out, knew exactly what the plan was. And in one moment, one flash of light, it is all stripped away. There is this whole period that he now is going to go through of fasting and of prayer and of quietness, just completely blind, has no, can't see anything whatsoever, and just waiting, quiet time. Have you ever had a time where you've just reached that point of uncertainty, not sure where to go? What's the next plan? You thought you knew what God intended for you to accomplish, but now you aren't really sure. And when you inquire, God's silent. Nothing. What do we do then? What should we do in those type of times? Remember what Blackaby encouraged us to do. When you're not sure what to do moving forward, just keep doing the last thing that God told you to do, but keep asking God and keep trying to determine His will, trying to discern His will through the Holy Spirit, through what? Bible study, prayer, circumstances, and the church body. So there's one way that we could do that. We want to confirm what that new assignment is. But the sad part is too often we're willing to make it happen. We have that Americanitis. It's almost a disease, right? If you're not sure, just force it. Just make it happen. I call it driving a square peg in a round hole. We will do it, even if it's not meant to be done. We think we can make it happen, and that's what we will do. But there's a point where the dark night, that blindness is necessary. Sometimes it's just to pull us back and to slow us down. And we need to unlearn some of those old things that we thought we were certain of. Everything that we thought, there's a point where God blinds us to our plans and the strategies that we have, so that hopefully we will take a moment and begin to see through His eyes instead of through our eyes. And too often that's where we fall short, because what do? We just stay busy, busy, busy. And we don't stop. And we don't pray. And we don't check His scripture. We don't read. We don't meditate on His word. The exact things that we know that we're supposed to do, but those are the things that we don't do. Saul did. When his sight is taken from him, he spends 3 days, no food, fasting. He is focused on God. What is the plan? I don't understand. My whole world was just shaking. He is unlearning all those old certainties that he knew. This is the way it shall be, and this is what we're going to do, and this is going to please God. Unfortunately for us, when we reach those points, I will tell you, we'll do one of two things more than likely. One, you will follow your feelings. And I tell you, your feelings are going to deceive you. Never trust your feelings. Emotions, that is not where it's at. It's only going to get you in trouble. The other thing we will do is we will follow our heart. You hear that all the time. Just follow your heart. You'll be okay. You watch it on Facebook memes. You'll see it all over the place. What does the Bible say about your heart? It is deceitful above all things. It's desperately wicked. Don't follow your heart would be don't give in to your feelings. Don't let emotions rule you. That's when you become destabilized, when you become unstable in all your ways. And then we see here that Saul ends up being reliant on other people. Think about it. This is the guy that was trained by who? Gamaliel. He was like the teacher of all teachers for the Pharisees. And Saul was a Pharisee. That's almost, in Arkansas, that's like saying I'm a Republican. Saul was a Pharisee, right? I'm just teasing, you know that. But here he was so proud. He was so independent. He was the Pharisee of Pharisees is how he would describe himself at other times. And he's got this mature faith that in his eyes, he doesn't need community. In fact, he's going to, he's out to prosecute this new community, the way that has sprung up. And, and unfortunately for us, many times we're not willing to lean on others when we need to be leaning on others. Saul all of a sudden found himself in a position where he had to rely on people to lead him on the rest of the way into Damascus, and lean on those that were around him just to be there. And obviously we're going to see here in just a second that Ananias comes in and had to rely on somebody, a lowly layperson, basically, right? It's almost a way that we would put it if we were that snooty type of thing. But what can we learn from it? We're always willing. Are we always willing to lean completely on the help of others, no matter what's going on? And chances are the answer is no. What do? We hide what's going on in our lives. We want to, I don't want to bother anybody. I don't want anybody to know. This is a matter of personal privacy. So we don't share any of that stuff. And none of that stuff is scriptural. You realize that, don't you? I mean, even when we do wrong, the Bible says, confess your faults one to another. Why? So that you may be healed. Pray, confess your faults one to another. Pray for one another so that you may be healed. We recite that with our, pat ourselves on the back, and we walk out and we never practice it for one moment. I think of the, of a child. When I heard my uncle, he's long passed on. He's a pastor in a little independent Baptist church back where Robin and I met, actually. But he talked about the life, a life of a person. When you're first born, that child is totally dependent on others to do things for them, change their diaper, feed them, make sure that they remain safe, get them into bed when they need to get in bed, keep them away from the toys that are going to be dangerous or whatever type of stuff. But as they grow up, what do? They become independent. I mean, some of you, when your kids hit 16, they turn independent. Ours was more like 13 until 23. She had to be independent. I'm doing it my way. I don't need your help. I don't need your anything, except for our money, of course. But anyways. But he said, it's not about dependence and it's not about independence. It's about interdependent. And that's the truth in the church life too. I can't do this by myself. That's dependent. I'm independent. I do this completely by myself. You don't need to know anything. I also don't want to be a leech and be so dependent. Everybody's got to do everything for me type of thing. That's not healthy either. Interdependent is where it is. That's where we should be. We should be able to lean on another, trust one another, be there for one another, intercede for one another. Paul, above all in his own mind, he is now humbled, and he makes that switch where he was independent, just running 1,000,000 miles an hour. I've got God's will, and I'm mandate, and I'm off and running. Now, the brakes have been put on, and he has been humbled. And the thought that came to my mind, I'll just pose this out there as a rhetorical question and we'll move on. Do you really want God to humble you as he did Paul in order to recognize your unfaithfulness to his word and to his teachings? Because if we're doing what Saul was doing, we're being that Pharisee, we're being that, just running and gunning, thinking we've got it all figured out. What's left? God, at some point, you got to expect God's going to say, I'm going to put a stop to this right here. We're going to have a conversation. Verses 10 through 16, the costly call. The costly call. Brother Greg, do you mind reading that for me? 10 through 16.
There was a certain disciple named Ananias, Behold, I am here, Lord. The Lord said unto him, Rise, go into the street which is called Straight, inquire in the house of one called Saul, Tarsus. Behold, he prayed, and seeing a vision, a man, Ananias, coming in and putting his hand on him. And Ananias answered the Lord, I have heard by many of this man, how much evil he hath done to thy saints. Here he hath authority to preach by Paul, call my name. The Lord said unto him, Go thy way, for he is chosen vessel unto me, to bear my name before the Gentiles, kings, and children of Israel. I will show him how great things he must suffer for my name.
There you go. I mean, you know what? Saul wasn't the only one being tested. Ananias was tested at this point, was he not? You think about it. He is just this, ordinary guy, just an ordinary disciple. And then all of a sudden he gets a call that says, hey, you go have a conversation with the most dangerous guy on the planet. He is out to kill every one of you that believe in me. But I'm sending you to him, directly to him, by the way. I'm going to give you a street address, because he does. He gives him the street address. Go down that road and go talk to him. You know that had to shake Ananias to his core. And obviously he does. He actually has a conversation with God. That's not always the best thing, but sometimes it's not necessarily wrong either. As we talked about this morning with Cain. Cain could have a little bit of a conversation with God and still not have crossed over into sin. At least that's the way that I see that at that point here. But, he's assigned to go. This has got to be a huge stretch for Ananias to go confront the person that is carrying the papers from Jerusalem to lock him up, if not just outright just kill him right there on the spot. Is he going to comply? Is he willing to go talk to the hater of all those that follow Jesus, that are of the way? He was going to, Paul saw these folks. One, Paul saw himself as being perfectly in God's will, doing exactly what he should be doing. And he saw those that were following Jesus, that were following the way, as the ones that were apostate, that were introducing heresy into the church. And, they were Jesus freaks, is what they were. And now, all of a sudden, his life is about to change, obviously. But, maybe one day God's going to test you that way. Maybe he's got somebody that he's going to need you to go have a conversation with that you don't consider a pleasant person, that you don't consider an easily accessible, that you don't even like, that you don't want to be around because of what they do and how they talk and where they go and what practices they have a part of their daily life or whatever. But here's a guy that, even though he believes that Saul's going to be hostile to the gospel, God's already been doing a work that Ananias is not even aware of. And I encourage you to remember that if God ever still lays somebody on your heart, you go talk to that person. Oh, he is hostile. There is no way he's going to listen to me. God's already been working. If God's going to lay that charge on your heart, don't think God's not already been preparing the way. It is okay. So, he tests Ananias, and Ananias obviously has this hesitation that he's got to overcome. What do I do? Are you sure, Lord? And he questions God about, come on, Saul's got this horrible track record. He's been killing people. That's pretty bad. That's a pretty bad track record, right? And we have to recognize that sometimes our discipleship, when it comes to helping others, we have to be willing to help messy people and lead them out of the darkness and into the light, and that they can see not just what their past has been, how messed up it is, and dwell in that, but they can see what their God-given potential is. who they can be, who they already are in God's eyes, if they will just submit to his will. Have you ever been brave enough to question God's assignment? I don't know about you. I have. I mean, obviously, I've shared that as part of my testimony, just being up here. I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? I mean, and maybe we've had those moments, and here Ananias, he's got to be going like, I knew I was getting old because my hearing just completely went out. Say that again. Did I hear you right or did I hear you wrong? He knew who God was talking about. But God obviously didn't let him off the hook and made sure that he stayed at it. And we should too as well. We should recognize that even if we hesitate for a moment, I like the fact that Ananias double checked with God. He didn't just write it off and go do his own thing. And maybe we can learn something from that as well. And I love the fact also here that God is always patient with us and tolerates us even when we question him for the moment, especially when it is a big step, right? Too often we try to bargain with God, and that's not the right thing to do. I think of Moses at the burning bush, right? I mean, this was a big thing for Moses when God called him and said, I'm sending you back to lead my people out of Egypt. And Moses like, what you talking about, Willis? No, this ain't going to happen. Not me. I can't even talk straight. And he starts making all these excuses. And God actually allowed Moses, tolerated him to a degree. And God may very well tolerate us to a degree, but I hope that we overcome that impulse and learn from his experience, because when it was all said and done, yes, God gave him somebody to help because he just, his Aaron obviously gave him someone to come alongside and help him because he didn't see himself as being able to do it. But it cost Moses blessing. It cost Moses some of the whatever, I guess I can't even think of what the word would be there. It it was ultimately it was a detriment to him. Remember who it was that created the golden calf? Aaron, the one that he asked God to let him come alongside and help him. I mean, let's not be that person. Avoid the impulse to question God and then negotiate our way out of his will and into some better arrangement or something better for us that we think. We're always looking too short. We're always looking at the short instead of the long. So, and here, one other thing here, chosen instrument. God reveals that as mature disciples, that there is an element of suffering that is involved. When he's talking to Ananias, he says, I've got a plan for this guy. It's not going to be a fun walk, but he is going to walk it with me and for me. And we can expect suffering in our walk as well. Saul is chosen not for comfort, but to endure hardship for the sake of Christ. God didn't say that he had an easy road planned. He never told you or me that he had an easy road plan. He's got a plan for his will, but ultimately his plan is to glorify Jesus. It's not to make us comfortable. It's not to be convenient for us, and we need to recognize that. And when our focus is right, and our focus is also on what brings you the most glory, Jesus, then we can come alongside and say, okay, Lord, here I am. Here am I, send me, right? That's what we need to be aware of. The last thing I want us to see, the ministry. And we're going to pretty much, so I got just a few application things here as we finish up this one last point here. Verse 17 through 19. Willie, do you mind reading 17 through 19?
And Ananias went to the house and entered it. Placing his hands on Saul, he said, Brother Saul, the Lord Jesus, who appeared to you on the road coming here, has sent me so that you may see again and be filled with the Holy Spirit.
There you go. The ministry of reconciliation and of community is what I want us to see here real quick. Did you see that one word that he was called? Ananias. Remember, this was an enemy of God, and Ananias calls him brother. You see the power in that word? I mean, that had to be a huge paradigm shift for Ananias and for Saul also in reality, because now Saul finds himself not persecuting those that are the followers of the way, but being on the inside and being one of. And for Ananias, here is a guy that, you know, written off, don't want anything to do. I'd like to be on another planet. When this guy's on this one, I'd like to be on a different planet to get as far away as I can. And all of a sudden, brother. You know, a lot of times we let even in the church, we'll let our political views, our socioeconomic status, I guess, some people are, at more in the lower middle class, some are upper middle class, some are, and then every now and then you find somebody that comes in and they're just like, man, they can make a gazillion dollars. And we let those type of things divide us. And all along, Scripture says, none of that matters. We are family. There should be nothing that we allow to divide us. Why do we let those, I'll call them constructs because that's just a great word. I like that word. Why do we let those constructs, those human constructs, separate us and divide us and we build in all these tiers? It doesn't matter at all. In eternity, 1,000 years from now, it will not matter whether I made 2 times more or less than you. And it will not matter how I vote in November. When we are brothers and sisters, man, that is a title that we should just seize upon and take joy in and just surround ourselves with it. Man, that thing comes with weight. That's a word that comes with weight, with spiritual weight, with the weight of Jesus's blood. It's written in. Brothers and sisters, we are part of the family of God. And he's restored not only his vision, but notice his purpose, right? Ananias comes in. It's like Christ walked right into the room, and all of a sudden the scales are falling. And who has a new purpose? Not Ananias. Saul has a new purpose in life. And you know how he will describe it? I am running a race. I am striving. I am leaning into it to win the prize. He will be off and running, and he will never look back about it. And, off he goes. He's got this God-given assignment. He doesn't equivocate. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't care whether he has resources or not. He's got God. He's got Jesus. He's got his calling, and off he goes. Too often, I think, we have a tendency to want to weigh things into balance. Well, Jesus, I'm yours. I'll do whatever you want me to do. But I want to figure it all out. I want to know that I've got the resources in place that I need to have. I want to know who that person is that's got my back when things get going rough. Do we have enough money to do that? What's the plan for next year? What's the plan for the year after? We have all these questions, and we rely, in the end, we start relying on our own ability and our own judgment calls instead of trusting in God. And it really comes down, and I think Blackaby hit it very well. Do we want to see what we can do, or do we want to see what God can do? Because when we're willing to say, there ain't no way that end chapel is ever going to get remodeled, but God, and we see it get built, he's the only one that can get the glory for it. We've got to be willing to go there. And we got to plug in. Notice he plugged into the local fellowship. Can you imagine he was coming to arrest these folks, possibly to murder them on the spot. And then Ananias said, let me introduce you to a new friend of mine, a brother. And in walked Saul into their midst. And what did they do? Man, they leaned into him. They fed him. They comforted him. They educated him. He was okay with that. He was willing to let them pour into him. Notice he didn't just say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! I've had a word from Jesus." Miss Barbara, have you heard Jesus talk to you audibly? I don't think so. So evidently, I've got the better word. So I don't need y'all. I'm out of here. That wasn't what Saul did. But we do that too often, don't we? We want to say, "Yeah, I can do this. I got this. I got the word from God, and here I go." And we're never willing to allow others to come alongside and to be part of that, or to even be we just, that's the way we want to do. We don't necessarily question God to force him to provide all the things we need, but we start making our plans to develop our resources and who our contacts are. Or we go to exact extreme and we say, "I don't need any of your resources. I don't need any of y'all as my contacts. I'm just going to be able to do this on my own." And both of those are extremes. Neither one of them are the way to be. That isn't who we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to work. It's about what God can do with you, not what you can do for God when it's all said and done. So, 3 applications and we're out. And we're talking here, for the most part, about seasoned, long-term believers. First one, examine your current paradigm. I love the movie Sahara. I hate to admit that, but if you ever watch Matthew McConaughey and Steve Zahn in Sahara, there's a point where they're riding their camels through the desert. They're looking for this ironclad monitor gunship from the Civil War that supposedly had gold on it, that sailed up a river, and they're riding camels in the sand in the desert. And Al Giordano has to ask Dirk Pitt, who is the other character, who is Matt's, "Hey, do you think maybe we need to re-examine our paradigm? Because, here we are, we're chasing an ironclad monitor from the Civil War in Virginia, coming down the James River, and now we're riding camels in the sand in Africa and following pictograms that we found in a cave in the Sahara Desert. Maybe we need to stop and rethink this." And that's really, in some ways, maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe we need to do exactly that. Are there areas in our spiritual life where our habits, our traditions, or our preferences are actually working against us and against true worship rather than what God is currently doing? We just keep doing the same thing we've always done because it's comfortable. It's what we think is right. But yet God's already off and running in a different plan. Maybe sometimes we need to stop, just like Paul, all of a sudden the brakes were put on him, and examine our own paradigms, examine ourselves. What changes may we need to do? How about identify your Ananias assignment? There's liable to be a day when Jesus says, "I need you to go talk to that difficult person." That messy person just supposedly came to Christ, and yet they're still just a mess. And it's almost abrasive to be around them. I don't want to be around them. Maybe you're the Ananias for them. And who knows what God's going to do with them once you're there to pour into their lives and to come alongside them and welcome them into the family, brother, sister. Who's your Ananias assignment? And then lastly, embrace your seasons of blindness. If God had currently paused what you've got going on in your life, the world's come out from underneath of your plans, your grand plans, the vision that you had cast, maybe if your what you considered how you were going to plug into ministry and serve and all that stuff, and all of a sudden it just all comes to a stop and God just shuts it down for a minute. I encourage you, treat that like Paul did. Be in your Damascus room. What did he do? Fast, pray, seek the Lord, and let him reshape your sight for what he wants to do with you when you're willing to get out of his way and just turn it over to him. Let's stand together. I don't know about you, I like those first 19 verses of chapter 9.